telephone rings, pulls your heartstrings, you run and pick it up. Wrong number.
Wrong number.
Ain't you sorry?
Ain't you sorry?
You see a car, oops, it went too far. Wrong car, wrong driver. Ain't you sorry? Gee, ain't it strange how sounds can let you down? When the girl you've been loving ain't nowhere to be found. When you're alone, waiting for love.
When you're all alone and you're waiting. When you're all alone and you're waiting.
Oh, when you're alone, waiting for love.
When you're all alone and you're waiting. When you're all alone and you're waiting.
You hear footsteps down the hall. You run to the door. Ain't nobody you know. Ain't you sorry?
Ain't you sorry?
You're pulling out your hair, 'cause it's the lady going upstairs with the groceries. Oh Lord, ain't you sorry? Gee, ain't it strange how sounds can let you down? The girl you've been loving ain't nowhere around, and you're all alone, waiting for love.
When you're all alone and you're waiting.
Oh,
When you're all alone and you're waiting.
when you're alone, yeah, waiting for love.
When you're all alone and It's time for healing. Inside of you and me. Healing. Healing through us. Oh yeah. Human family. Nation to nation. Nation to nation. Spirit and soul to soul. Open up your heart. And let the healing flow. We got to have healing. We got to have healing. We got to have healing.
War and destruction escalate. A worldwide epidemic of ignorance and hate has infected people of all faiths and colors, poisoned them against their sisters and brothers, yes.
That is not the way that it's supposed to be. No, no. We were meant to live in peace and harmony. There are so many old wounds and scars, keeping us apart. It's time for healing. Inside of you and me. Healing. Healing through us. Oh yeah. Human family. Nation to nation. Nation to nation. Spirit and soul to soul. Open up your heart and let the healing flow. We got to have healing. We got to have healing. We got to have healing.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Health in Harlem here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Today, I'm not very happy to be talking about the topic that we are talking about, but it's very necessary in the current climate that we have in the United States. Unfortunately, it's become a fact that we are dealing with mass shootings almost on a daily basis at this point. And I'm not exaggerating that. I mean it quite literally. In 2016, we had a total of 383 shootings, so more than one a day on average. And in 2017, we had 346 mass shootings, meaning that we are dealing with it literally almost on a day-to-day basis. So we've almost become a little desensitized, I feel like, as a nation to mass shootings because, you know, you pop up on, you turn on the news, you go on Facebook, social media, and you see another one has happened. And, you know, we kind of just accepted that this is the norm. Meanwhile, it's definitely not the norm. It shouldn't be status quo. And it's not something that we see across the world in the same to the same extent. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about the gun laws that we have in place, how they affect the number of shootings that we have. We want to talk about the prevalence of these of gun violence in the United States. And we also wanted to talk about what you can do if you are caught in one of these situations, how to increase your chances of survival, as well as how you can treat others or yourself if you are injured in through gun violence or a mass shooting. And lastly, we want to talk about what are the lasting mental health impacts of survivors of mass shootings, or even people who were in the vicinity or attended a place that had a mass shooting before. So even if you weren't there on that day of school, knowing that your school had a mass shooting, what kind of effects that has on you. So we're going to get through all of that in the next half an hour. First up, we wanted to, I'm going to introduce the crew today. We're a little bit short-staffed, but my name is Giorgio Maloof, and then we have...
I'm Reed Vero.
Hey guys, I'm DJ.
They got it this week. I'm so happy. So you're going to hear my voice crackle a couple times today. I'm sorry. I'm getting over some bronchitis that I got last week. Yeah, that's what happens when you're not sleeping well. But back to this important topic. Reed, can you explain to us a little bit about the gun laws that are in place right now, how they restrict people or not restrict people, and then we're going to get to what this means for the gun ownership in the United States.
Of course. So really in firearm technology, the only part of the gun that is illegal to own if you don't have a permit, or the part that you need a permit to own, is called the receiver, which is a part of the frame which provides housing for the internal components, such as the hammer, the bolt, the action, and the firing mechanism. And there is a thing called unfinished receivers, or 80% receivers, which are quite dangerous because they're partially completed receivers with no serial numbers. So people who are able to purchase these without a background check, they're able to finish milling them on their own and put together their own gun completely without a background check or without having to get a permit in order to buy this gun. But gun laws in New York City are on the more strict end of gun laws in the country. In order to buy a gun, this is all talking about handguns, shotguns and rifles. It's much easier to get a shotgun rifle permit. But in talking about handguns, you must be an American citizen or alien card holder over 21 years of age. And you also must have lived in the country for 7 years. If you have lived in the country for less than 7 years, you can buy a gun, but the process is more strenuous. So in order to buy any gun, you have to have a handgun license for a handgun or a rifle or shotgun permit for a rifle or shotgun. In order to get these, you have to apply and be fingerprinted, and the application includes submitting photographs of yourself, a proof of residence, a social security card, having a New York driver's license, also an interview and background check. So there's 5 different kinds of permits. I'm just briefly going to touch on a couple of them. So there's a premise license, which means you can only use the gun on the premises, which you provide when you're getting the license. So basically your house, saying, I live here, here's my address, I'm going to use this gun for protection if I must, only at this address. It's harder to get a carrying license, and there's different variations of a carrying license, but it is illegal to have an open carry in New York City and New York State, which means that if you want to carry your gun, you have to get a concealed carry license, which means that you have to get a license so that you can carry it so people don't know. You can't have it out in the open, which is an open carry. So the National Rifle Association Institute of Legislative Action says that it is incredibly hard to get a gun permit in the city compared to other places. And the New York Police Department does not allow a New York City gun license to be used anywhere outside of the city, which means if you have a gun license from outside of the city, if you live in New York, you are not allowed to, that license does not translate into the city. You can't bring your gun into the city. If you have a gun in the city and you have a gun license in the city, that does not translate to upstate or out of the city or any other state. So in 2012, a federal appeals law in New York passed a decision requiring gun owners who seek a concealed permit to provide proof of special need for protection, which means that it's just all that much harder to get a concealed carry permit in New York State and New York City.
So what does that mean for gun ownership? So we have these rules that we're saying that are supposed to restrict the number of gun owners that we have. We understand that there's the Second Amendment, which allows you constitutionally to own one, to bear arms. And so what does it mean in terms of the number of people who own guns in the United States versus, let's say, other countries, and what kind of implications it has in terms of the number of shootings or deaths?
Well, the U.S. has a very small percent of the total world's population, but we have just under 50% of the civilian carried guns. So that means that we have a lot of guns in the U.S. compared to other countries among civilians. So obviously with a lot of guns, potentially comes a lot of problems. And in this case, the U.S. has much higher fatalities and also just mass shootings than any other country in the world.
So, other findings that, let's say, Harvard Institute has found through their research on gun violence is that where there are more guns, there are more homicides. And and this is across high-income nations, more guns means more homicides. It's not debatable. It's what the data says. Across states where there are more guns, there are more homicides. Across states, more homicides are linked to, more suicides are also linked to having a higher gun ownership. And as well as that, we have more guns being used in homicide of police wherever the states have a higher gun ownership rate. So right now we have already a fact that more than 48% of Americans own a gun, and these are civilians. These are not, military or police gun owners. And, if we just say, what about the residents in general? So we have an average of 89 firearms per 100 people. The only other country that comes close is Yemen with 55 guns per 100 people. So if we were to go down the list, I don't even see Russia on here. I don't see China on here. I don't see any of these other competing major countries that are developed on this list. And so we are definitely leading, just like what we've done with our military, we've done with our gun ownership. And now, as for the number of gun incidents, we have about 61,000 incidents of gun violence in 2017. 15,612 of them resulted in death. 735 of those were children between the ages of 0 to 11. Another 3,239 of them were between the ages of 12 to 17. And then we have 2,080 shootings of police officers killing suspects. And we have 316 incidents where a officer was shot or killed. Now, a lot of people say that we need guns in order to protect ourselves from home invasions or for defensive use. And the numbers simply don't support that hypothesis because, it's only 2,500 shootings that had to do with home invasions and about 2,000 that had to do with defensive use, meaning that we have just as much unintentional shootings, which is 2,028, as defensive shootings, and just about as many unintentional shootings as home invasion shootings. So what that means is we're not prepared to be able to, we're not trained to be able to use these firearms safely. If we have an equal number of chance shootings, you have it in your pocket or in your holster and it goes off by accident, as we do people who are using it in a home invasion defensive use situation. And all of those numbers combined, that 6,000 is less than 10% of the total number of incidents, meaning that 90% of them weren't for home invasions, defensive use, or even unintentional shootings. Now, that being said, we don't want to get more political than that. We do want to get back to the health implications of this. It has become an epidemic, and so we need to deal with devising a plan for how we can minimize the amount of harm that we can get into if we are in an active shooting scenario. Because let's face it, at this rate, we likely will be in the vicinity of one, especially if you are in the Northeast or in California. So it seems like wherever there are urban areas, mass shootings are more prominent. So that's also the case with police shootings as well. So what do we do if we are caught in this situation where there is an active shooter? First of all, DJ, how long do they typically last? And what are some of the recommendations that the Homeland Security and other survival experts have posed for how to avoid major harm in these kinds of situations?
So an active shooter scenario lasts about 10 to 15 minutes, which in that situation can feel like a lifetime. Your life is probably flashing before your eyes. But the best option and like what's critical is to try to evacuate. You just want to remove yourself from the situation completely. If possible, you want to call 911, only if, you won't be detected or heard. You want to warn anybody that you see to, evacuate the area and to not be within that range. Leave your personal belongings behind. I know how expensive computers and cell phones and laptops can be, but it's not worth your life in this scenario. Try to figure out an escape route if you're familiar with the terrain. If you see somebody wounded, try not to move them because you might end up harming them if you end up encountering an active shooter. And if possible, try to help others that are fleeing that are in your situation because, together you guys might be able to figure out something. And, keep your hands visible. Make sure, to show you're not armed, you're not a threat. If you can't escape, the next best thing you can do is to hide. So you want to get out of the path of the shooter completely. So you want to remain still and silent. You want to turn off your phone, any sort of electronic devices, because, you don't want them to hear and find you. Try to lock the door wherever room or closet you're in so that, they have no entry. You want to try to blockade the door if there's any sort of heavy furniture so that hinders them from trying to enter the room. Make sure you're not within the shooter's range of view, at all. Try to keep yourself hidden, in some sort of corner. Do this by staying away from any windows. If there are any curtains on the windows, just shut those. And yeah, just stay low. Try to find cover under any sort of tables or objects. And don't leave your hiding place unless you're absolutely sure that, the police have arrived and the situation has de-escalated. And as much as I don't want to say, if it gets to the point where you can't leave and you can't hide, if you have to fight back, this should be the completely last resort. Act fast, don't hesitate, and do it with an intention to harm the shooter. Be as aggressive as possible. Throw items, yell, scream, wave your arms to try to distract them. Just to, get them out of their mindset. Because, the most important thing is that, you walk out of that room safely. Yeah.
So what can we do if we are in a situation where we've tried all these things and we just, someone has been harmed already or, either injured or potentially unstable? That's where we need to spring into action, but we need to make sure that we are aware of our scenario. So we're going to take a short 2-minute break, and whenever we get back, we're going to talk about some of the first aid tactics that you can use if you are ever in a active shooting situation. And so please don't touch the dial. We'll be right back here on WHCR 90.3 FM, and you are now listening to Health in Harlem.
Its own radio station, WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Harlem's got its own radio station.
Once again, back is the incredible
WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
That's
Hi, I'm Vinny B of the Vinny B Showcase. Tune in every Thursday from 8 to 12 midnight for some solid cultural roots music and some sweet lovers rock. Also, informative interviews and giveaways. Right here on the Vinny B Showcase every Thursday, 8 through 12 midnight on WHCR 90.3 FM. Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Health in Harlem here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Today we're talking about gun violence, and right now we're about to discuss some of the tactics that you can use if you're found in an active shooting scenario, because it is a reality that you might be. And so we're going to focus on how you can treat gunshot wounds right now. We already spoke about how you can try and avoid being in the vicinity by either hiding and locking yourself up, or in a worst case scenario, defending yourself against the active shooter. And now I need to tell you guys a little bit about responding, basically either to your friends or colleagues that you might see that have been harmed. So the first thing that you need to do is be cognizant of your environment. What I mean by that is that you need to look around for potential threats, because in that scenario, if you are unharmed, you are the greatest asset to everyone around you, including yourself. So while you're looking for exits, you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for everyone. And so your first priority should be making sure that your health is not is not going to be impacted. That's the first thing that you need to do. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting a caller. If he doesn't mind just staying on the line, we will pick up the phone in just 1 second. So first thing that you need to do is assess your environment to make sure that you have the ability to act without getting yourself in harm. The next thing you want to do is approach the other person and see where the gunshot wound is to. In this case, when there is a mass casualty, you need to be able to look at your victims and see basically who has the best chance of surviving. And if someone looks like they are fatally harmed already, meaning that it's a gunshot wound to the chest, they're unresponsive, they're not conscious, obviously. In that case, you would want to see if there's anyone else that you can try and help in that situation, because you could save 5 lives or try for that same time to save one person who's already critically injured. So the next thing after your triage is to try and control the bleeding one and make sure that their breathing is going to be is going to stay patent. And the way that you're going to do that is, first of all, you want to check for signs of bleeding from obvious entry and exit wounds. And whenever you do see an open appendage or if you see a gunshot wound, you want to apply direct pressure. And this might sound a little counterintuitive, because you'd want to, do like what's happening in the movies. You pull out the gun, the bullet out of the wound. But that's absolutely not what you want to do, because you can actually cause more bleeding if that bullet is in contact with either a vital organ or an artery, and it's holding that artery from basically bursting out with the blood. So you kind of want to make sure that you just apply pressure directly above the gunshot wound and use gauze if available. And if that doesn't work, and in cases like this it might not, you want to use what's called a tourniquet. Now there are commercially available tourniquets, as well as tourniquets you can make by hand by basically using a piece of cloth and going about 2 inches above where the wound is. And what you can do is basically twist a hard item. You don't want to use a pen, but if in that case you have only a pen, you'll use that because they can snap under the tension. and you just want to start twisting with the cloth wrapped around the pen so that you create tension that's enough to cut off the arterial blood flow. So you need to be able to touch the person's pulse and not feel a pulse there because the blood flow has been cut off. And what that helps you do is control the artery from bleeding out. So other than that, those are your two main options in that case. You want to make sure that you do everything possible to allow them to prevent further bleeding and get them out of there as quickly as possible. So another thing to note is that it's no longer advised to use an occlusive dressing for the healthcare providers that are listening in. What that means is basically a plastic cover over a wound that you would place to prevent air from coming in. And so that's no longer being advised by the American Heart Association. And so what you should be doing, and you shouldn't be raising the appendage above the heart. That's no longer advised based on the research that they've done. So really, you want to just get out of that scenario as quickly as possible and allow emergency care professionals to come in and be able to evacuate and transport the victims of this mass casualty. But if you do find yourself as the first responder, what you can do, once again, is control that bleeding and try and make sure that they're able to breathe. Now, let's see if we could get the caller back on the line. Just give me 1 second. Hello? Hello?
Hi, is this the radio show?
Yeah, hi. This is my friend and roommate Andrew, who we have on the line. He's working for a startup helping to develop smart guns. So Andrew, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your work?
Yeah. So it all started with a competition posted by the NYPD to develop smart gun applications for their officers. It was the winner was supposed to award a grant that didn't go to us. That actually went to NYU, but it's still sort of a wide open field. And the whole idea behind a smart gun is that you're taking basically so all sorts of technologies are getting smart. Like, it started with phones. It's moving to like televisions and computers. Like just basically any appliance. And so guns are technology that's been around, and putting using computers to do things that haven't been explored before just seemed like the logical next step in the evolution of the technology.
Awesome. So Andrew, in your opinion, why do you feel that these smart guns are necessary?
I think smart guns are coming regardless of what people, like how people feel about them politically. I think it's just sort of, so like, there's going to be a place in the market for them regardless. Like, you might have some skeptical people about owning guns might feel more comfortable. I'm sorry, there's some static coming on your end.
You can't hear us?
No, just want to, I think, take my mic away from, there's like a feedback loop.
We can hear you perfectly, so if you want to just keep talking.
All right, so there's a hole in the market for smart guns. Like, they're gonna come regardless of what people think. My idea is we just want to sort of get a hold on the technology and the intellectual property. I'm sorry, I can't talk, but there's a feedback loop whenever I start talking, so could you just please, like,
So I don't know if that helps. I'm sorry, there's nothing that we could do about any kind of feedback that you're hearing. Is this...
Whenever I talk, I feel a really loud noise on my end, and it's really hard to speak.
I got you. Okay, so I guess we'll have to call you back at a different time then, just because right now we're running out of time on the program, getting ready for the next show. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get you on and without the feedback, but we appreciate you calling, and we hope that you call back the program at a different time.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, I'm sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. So, in essence, we are trying to develop smart guns that are going to reduce the number of fatalities that are in a point of where we don't want it to happen. So it's more controllable, so that we go from the current application to having something that is less fatal when it doesn't need to be fatal. And so other than that, I just wanted to, I think we're going to have to actually revisit this topic next week, perhaps, and go a little bit more in detail. We didn't get a chance to talk about some of the mental health implications of the gun violence that we are experiencing in the United States. And so I think we owe it to our audience to bring this back next week for further discussion. And hopefully we can get your roommate on again to explain the whole concept a little bit clearer.
Maybe even in person in the studio.
Yeah, why not? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to Health in Harlem here on WHCR 90.3 FM. We do have one last message before we sign off and give the board over to Vinny B of the Vinny B Showcase. If you could, we have a message for the audience so that they can make a donation in support of the show. If you could please go to WHCR.org and click on the donation tab in the top right-hand corner, or mail a check or money order to WHCR 90.3 FM, 160 Convent Avenue, North Academic Center, 1513, New York, New York, 10031. We would really appreciate it, and we would be thanking you publicly for supporting the show. And, we are a non-commercial station, and therefore we run on the support that we get from people like you who enjoy our programming and find it meaningful. All right, thank you so much for tuning in to WHCR and Health in Harlem. Please don't touch the dial. We have Vinny B of the Vinny B Showcase up next, and we will be listening to his music right now.
Harlem has its own radio station. For you and yours, WHCR 90.3 FM.
The loudest party in the whole universe.
The voice of Harlem.
Oh, wisdom, you got to have it, yeah. Oh, wisdom, rise up in spite, don't be shy, with love in your eyes. You got to be conscious, you got to be righteous. Can't you see the sign of the time we're living in? Got to use it, yeah. Every day. It's what we need today. Whoa. You got to use it, yeah. Every day. It's what we need today. Yeah. Wisdom and knowledge will guide you through. Don't you be the devil too. No, you can't guide a people without a vision. You shall surely go astray. You got to use it, yeah. Every day. wisdom. Whether you wise or you dumb, an elder can teach you wisdom. Whether you're old or you're young, oh wisdom, oh wisdom, oh wisdom. Only a fool trust in his own eye and disregard correction. You got to be humble, free from anger, and your days shall be low. You gotta use every day. It's what we need today. You gotta use it, yeah. Every day. It's what we need today. Oh, wisdom.
You are listening to 90.3 FM, WHCR, the voice of Harlem.
Oh, wisdom. Hey.
Fellow citizens of Africa, I greet you in the name of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League of the World. As you are aware, the world in which we live today is divided into separate race groups and distinct nationalities. Each race and each nationality is endeavoring to work out its own destiny to the exclusion of other races and other nationalities. We hear the cry of England for the Englishman, of France for the Frenchman, of Germany for the German, of Ireland for the Irish, of Palestine for the Jew, of Japan for the Japanese, of China for the Chinese. We of the Universal Negro Improvement Association are raising the cry of Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. The great problem of the Negro for the last 500 years has been that of disunity. No one or no organization ever succeeded in uniting the Negro race.
Enslavers was done for 300 years, the bodies of men. You can shackle the hands of men, you can shackle the feet of men, you can imprison the bodies of men, but you cannot shackle or imprison